Out there, where the ocean forgets land and only sky remains, something fought to live. It wasn't a story anyone was meant to hear. No viral photo, no heroic rescue headline. Just silence, salt, and something barely clinging to the surface of the sea. It was just past noon when Thomas Grady, a 42-year-old ex-Navy diver turned fisherman, saw it. A dark shape bobbing in the water 135 miles from the Florida coast. No land in sight, no boats, nothing but sun-scorched sky and endless blue. At first glance he thought it was driftwood, maybe a leftover buoy, but it moved against the tide. Thomas squinted into the horizon. Something didn't sit right. Cut the engine, grabbed the binoculars from the dashboard, and when the image came into focus, a chill shot down his spine. A dog, a German shepherd, head barely above the water, fighting to stay afloat. It didn't make sense, not out here. This far from anything, the water was still. That deceptive kind of still that always came before the sea turned mean. The kind that made old fishermen uneasy. Thomas didn't hesitate. Shirt off, rope ladder down, dive in. The salt hit his eyes like needles. The cold wrapped around his ribs. But he swam hard, focused on the dark blur, barely holding on. When he reached the dog, there was no struggle. The shepherd collapsed into his arms like wet laundry. No resistance, no awareness. Just a body trying not to die. Back on deck, Thomas knelt beside the animal, brushing soaked fur from its face. Its chest rose, shallow, steady, just barely. "You're alive," Thomas whispered. "You crazy, beautiful beast. You're alive." Wrapped in a tarp, the shepherd didn't move. But those amber eyes opened, not wide, just enough. There was something there. Not fear, not pain. Something older. Something harder. Will. As Thomas started the engine again, guiding the boat toward the coast, he looked back at the sea. It had almost claimed this creature, almost buried him in silence. But not yet. One question burned hotter than the sun. What was a dog doing alone 135 miles offshore? Thomas didn't go to the police, didn't post online. Something about the dog felt off. Not in a bad way. Just too sharp, too quiet, too deliberate. He took him straight to a small vet clinic on the outskirts of Clearwater. The dog didn't move the entire drive. Just lay still on the towel in the passenger seat, eyes half-lidded, barely breathing. The receptionist looked up as Thomas entered, cradling the animal like a child. She opened her mouth to speak, but Thomas cut her off. Found him 135 miles. Out no boat, no tag, just him. The room fell silent. A vet tech appeared and quickly led them to the back. Within seconds, the shepherd was on a table surrounded by hands and instruments. Thomas waited, wet, cold, uncertain why he felt so connected already. This was a stray, right? Just a lost dog. But nothing about this felt accidental. 20 minutes later, the vet came out. Blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, sleeves rolled up, eyes wide with confusion. He's scraped up, dehydrated, bruised, and exhausted, but his vitals are shockingly strong, especially his heart. She handed Thomas a small, rusted metal fragment. "We found this caught in his fur near the collarbone. Looks like part of a dog tag. One letter remained." R. Thomas turned it over in his palm. "Nothing else? No chip, no collar, no ID?" He nodded, his jaw tight. "Thanks, I'll cover the bill." Back home, Thomas laid the shepherd on a blanket in his modest one-bedroom cabin by the water. He didn't name him, not yet. But he watched the dog carefully. He offered water. The dog drank, offered food. The dog refused. Hours passed. Thomas barely moved. He sat cross-legged, watching those eyes that seemed to follow him. Not in fear, not in trust, just analyzing. "You're not ordinary," Thomas whispered. "That much is clear." That night, the dog didn't sleep. Neither did Thomas. By morning, the shepherd stood, shaky, limps in his step but upright. He sniffed the air, patted around the room with calculated caution. He ignored loud noises. Didn't flinch when a broom handle clattered to the floor. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You're trained. He cooked some chicken. Set it down. The dog sniffed, then ate slowly, purposefully. Thomas tried a name. Ranger. The dog didn't react, but he didn't reject it either. That was enough. He reached out, carefully placing a hand on the shepherd's back. I don't know where you came from, he said, but I think you've seen things, haven't you? The dog didn't answer, but something in his gaze said everything. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling. Ranger wasn't just trained, he was mission-ready. His posture, his response to commands, even his silence, it all spoke of a history written in commands and discipline. So he made a call. Mike was a retired K-9 handler, ex-Special Forces. He didn't ask questions when Thomas said, I need your eyes on something. He showed up that afternoon. A tall man with military posture, Mike walked into the cabin slowly, scanning the space before his eyes landed on the German shepherd, sitting quietly in the corner. Sit, Mike said, calm but direct. Ranger didn't move. Lie down. Still nothing. Then Mike made a subtle gesture. 2 fingers curved downward, palm facing the floor. Instantly, Ranger dropped. Mike's eyebrows lifted slightly. Silent signals, used in tactical ops. Thomas stared. That wasn't a trick. Nope. That dog's been trained for something. Serious, I'd bet my pension on it. They ran a few more nonverbal commands. Ranger obeyed everyone with eerie precision. He didn't look afraid, he didn't look eager. He just followed, like a soldier. Mike walked around him slowly. He doesn't beg, doesn't flinch at noise, doesn't bark unnecessarily. He calculates. Wasn't like a pet when I found him, Thomas said. He was like someone trying to survive a battlefield. Mike frowned. That's probably what it was. They spent hours observing Ranger's behavior. At one point, Mike dropped a wrench behind him. Most dogs would jump. Ranger barely turned. Another time, Mike opened the door violently. Ranger moved, not in fear but to a vantage point, watching the door, not retreating, not attacking. Combat. Mindset, Mike confirmed. That's embedded. You can't fake that. This dog's not just trained, he's been deployed. That night, Thomas powered up his old laptop. Dusty, forgotten. Still connected to a few secure back doors from his Navy diving days. He hesitated, fingers over the keys. Then typed, German Shepherd, K-9, Tactical, No Chip, East Coast, Last Recon. Several queries failed. Then one pinged. Red text. Restricted File Operation. Nightmark Asset, R7 Assignment Offshore Recon. Status decommissioned, presumed lost at sea. Date, 3 days before discovery. Thomas leaned back. His heartbeat thundered. They knew. They knew this dog was out there, and they marked him lost, not rescued. No training notes, no handler listed. Just a phrase that chilled him. Terminated due to compromise. He closed the laptop, but it was too late. Out on the gravel, tires crunched. A black SUV. No plates. 2 men stepped out. One held a handheld device. The other scanned the house. With calm, clinical eyes, Ranger growled, low, controlled. Thomas grabbed his keys. We're leaving, now. They vanished into the woods. Thomas had prepped for escape years ago. An old trail through the woods, barely visible now, led to a rusted boat shed he once used for covert dive ops. Ranger moved like smoke beside him, silent, aware. They reached the truck. No headlights. Dirt path. 15 minutes later, they were at the abandoned marina. Inside the shed, Thomas laid out a blanket. Ranger sniffed every corner before settling near the entrance. Guarding. The laptop screen glowed faint in the dark. Thomas read the file again. This wasn't just a dog. This was an asset. Classified, trained, deployed, and someone wanted him. Erased. The next morning was unnaturally still. Ranger woke first. His ears pricked up before Thomas even stirred. Then they heard it, the low thrum of helicopter blades. Thomas stepped out, scanning the tree line. A black chopper hovered low. Silent tech. No markings. Then came the sound. High-pitched, barely. Audible. Ranger dropped, whimpered, paws to ears. Thomas ran back inside, grabbed the bag, the file. Ranger's eyes were wild, torn between fear and something deeper, something broken open. A figure emerged from the tree line. Not masked, no armor, just calm, controlled. In his hand, a small black remote. "You know him?" Thomas asked. Ranger didn't bark, didn't lunge. He shook. Then growled, soft, guttural. The man made a gesture. Sharp, direct. Two more figures appeared behind him, armed, advancing. Thomas moved to Ranger. "They're here to take you." Ranger's ears twitched. He crouched as if awaiting a command. "Don't listen to him," Thomas whispered. "You don't belong to them." The sound intensified. Ranger dropped lower, shaking now. And then he barked, once, twice, louder, angrier. He shot up, broke into a run, not away. Toward the truth, toward the fight. Thomas cursed and followed. They hit the clearing just as the figures reached the edge. Ranger lunged first, took down the first man with brutal precision. Thomas tackled the second, elbow, shoulder, weapon down. Then came the handler. Face to face, and Ranger stopped, eyes locked. Not in obedience, in recognition, but this time he chose something different. He turned and walked back to Thomas. Together, they stood and refused to run. Ranger crashed into the first figure like a missile, knocking the man sideways into a thicket of thorn and rock. The second figure had barely turned when Thomas barreled into him, years of military instinct kicking in like muscle memory. They both hit the ground hard. Gravel scraped Thomas's arms as he wrestled for control. The man's rifle clattered against a rock and spun out of reach. Thomas didn't hesitate. A swift elbow to the jaw sent the man limp. He rolled away just in time to see Ranger biting down on the first attacker's forearm, holding him pinned until the handler's sharp whistle pierced the chaos. "R7, stand down." The voice rang out with command, not volume, not threat, just years of reinforced authority. Ranger froze, mid-movement, ears cocked, teeth still exposed but motionless. That voice, it was in his bones, his blood, the voice that used to mean, "Home, order, obey." Thomas stood, breathing hard. "He's not R7. He stepped forward between Ranger and the man in black. "He's Ranger, and he made his choice." The handler's face didn't move. "You have no idea what you're protecting." "I know exactly what I'm protecting. A life, one that was nearly erased." "You're interfering with military property," the handler said. "R7 is not a pet. He is a classified asset, built to think, built to infiltrate, built to obey." Thomas narrowed his eyes. And yet he ran. He chose to live. Behind him, Ranger didn't move. His body was still tense, eyes locked on the handler, but his front paw edged closer to Thomas's boot. A sign. A claim. The handler took a step forward, face still calm, voice lower now. "Do you know what he's seen? What missions he's been part of?" He wasn't just trained, he was broken, rewritten. When he disappeared, they didn't send a rescue. They issued a deletion. Thomas swallowed. "You tried to kill him. We tried to protect the program, a dog with intel like his, data encrypted in his movement recognition systems, in micro-reflex drills, can't be left adrift." The truth crashed like a wave. Ranger hadn't just escaped. He had survived an execution. Thomas turned to him. "They tried to erase you." Ranger blinked once, then again. The handler pulled out a small device from his pocket. Not the sonic disruptor. A failsafe, a thumbprint-activated syringe already primed. Thomas tensed. "You're not walking out of here with him." "I don't need to walk out. I just need line of sight." His thumb hovered. Then, a blur. Ranger moved before Thomas could. Faster than anything he'd seen from him before. The syringe went flying. The handler stumbled back, not attacked, just disarmed. Ranger stood over him, not growling, just watching. "Do it," the handler dared. "Finish what they made you." But Ranger didn't move. Instead, he turned, walked back to Thomas, sat. The silence after was deafening. "You, see?" Thomas said quietly. "He was more than you ever understood." The Black Ops team watching from the tree line didn't move. One of them spoke into a headset. Then slowly, they began to back away. The handler stood, brushing off his coat. "You've made a mistake." Thomas shrugged. "Maybe, but it's ours." The helicopter lifted, rotors cutting through the morning air. As it vanished into the sky, Thomas turned to Ranger. "Let's go home." But it wasn't over. That night, back at the cabin, Thomas sat beside the fireplace. Ranger lay curled beside him, but his ears flicked at every wind shift. "You held back," Thomas said, "even when you had the advantage. Why?" Ranger opened his eyes, slow and steady, then stood. He walked to the table where the old, rusted tag lay, the one with the letter R. He nudged it off the table, a quiet rejection. Thomas smiled. "Yeah, I get it. You're not R7, never were." Outside, thunder rumbled, not from a storm, but from the low churn of helicopters in the far distance. Neither of them flinched. They were no longer hiding. They were ready. A week had passed since the standoff on the ridge. The days that followed moved slowly, like sunlight inching across the floor. But that pace was exactly what they needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ranger had space to breathe. And Thomas did too. The cabin had become more than shelter. It was a new perimeter. Not a prison, not a checkpoint, a sanctuary. Ranger now slept not curled in a corner but sprawled across the porch, belly toward the sky. His body had begun to heal, the muscle filling out again, the limp fading, the fur growing soft beneath Thomas's brushing hand. But deeper than that, the tension had ebbed. The twitch in his ears, the sudden head turns, the flinch at every sound. They were fading. Thomas watched him with quiet pride, not as a handler, not as a rescuer, but as a witness. "You're still figuring it out, huh?" he said one morning, setting a bowl of grilled chicken and rice near the edge of the porch. "Me too." Ranger didn't run to the bowl. He walked, measured, calm, sat, waited, then ate, slow and steady. Later that day, Thomas took him into town. It was the first time. The roads felt narrower, the eyes more curious. But no one asked too many questions. The pet shop on Main Street had set something aside. Linda, the owner, smiled wide as they entered. She crouched. "So you're the one everyone's been whispering about." Ranger tilted his head. Then, one quiet tail wag. She held up a collar, soft leather, simple gold engraving across the front. "Ranger." Thomas took it, thumb tracing the letters. "No code, no chain. Just a name," he said softly. The next stop was the beach, not the open sea, not where he had almost drowned. Just a quiet cove, gentle waves, children's laughter in the distance. Thomas didn't say anything, just unclipped the leash. Ranger hesitated. The sand felt different underfoot, softer, less certain, but he stepped forward, sniffed the air, then walked, slow at first, then with purpose. Thomas picked up a ball, tossed it. Ranger didn't chase it at first, just watched. Then he ran. It wasn't fast, it wasn't perfect, but it was free. The ball rolled back near Thomas's feet. Ranger didn't drop it, he nudged it forward, proud. Tail wagging now, more than once. "You're a beach dog now," Thomas said, laughing quietly. "Never thought I'd say that." They returned home as the sky turned gold. The cabin glowed in the low sun. On the porch, Thomas sat beside Ranger. No leash, no command. Just company. "You know," Thomas said after a long silence, "I still don't know what they were doing out there. With you. With that project." He glanced inside, where the file lay locked in a drawer. Still encrypted, still dangerous. "They'll be back, or someone like them. But we'll be ready, won't we?" Ranger leaned against him. No sound. Just presence. The next morning, Thomas woke before dawn. He found Ranger already up, sitting at the edge of the dock, watching the tide roll. The world had turned quiet, but not empty. There was peace in that stillness. And yet, even now, even as Ranger wore his new collar, Even as he chased balls and slept belly up in the sun, something in his eyes remained vigilant. Not fear, not trauma. Memory. Thomas stepped beside him. You were never just a tool, he said. You were someone. Ranger looked up, then looked back at the horizon. There was still more ahead. The story wasn't over. Not even close, because some secrets don't sink. They resurface, and when they do, Ranger would be ready. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, like, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. This is only the beginning. Episode 2 is coming, and Ranger's journey is far from over.